All right. Call to order the City of Austin Planning Commission for Tuesday, April 11th. Two items on the agenda tonight. Normally, we would first approve the minutes from the last meeting on March 14th, but not everyone got a copy of the minutes yet, so we're going to do that at the next meeting. So, first then on the agenda is an open public hearing to consider a petition from Nicola Blauman for a renewal of her 5-year interim use permit. Holly?
Yes, some of you may remember this matter from 5 years ago. The property in question is located at 107 27th Street Northwest. Is owned under the Wolfgang J. Bauman estate. The heirs to the estate are Nicola and Christoph Bauman. Nicola is the only heir that resides on the property. The petitioner has had a interim use permit to have horses on her property since 2017. The actual date that it started was in 2018 because the city was adding a retention pond. So that kind of delayed the actual start date of the interim use permit, which was agreed upon at the time. So that time period has come to its end, and the petitioner is asking for a renewal. The initial interim use permit was to house four houses on her property with some, which then necessitated some additional structures for shelter and storage of things relating to their care. This time, with the renewal of the interim use permit, the petitioner is asking that you also consider adding one additional horse. The other horses are nearing retirement age, and then the petitioner is also asking to add one additional, or actually not adding an additional structure, but doing an addition to an existing structure to accommodate some winter activity. The property is a private residence. The surrounding land uses are residential to the north, residential and commercial to the east, and commercial I-90 south and west. And the applicable ordinance provision looks at several factors, and I'll just go through each of those and make some comments, and then you can ask questions as we go along, or if you want to wait until the end. First, that the period of time for which the interim use permit is to be granted will terminate before any adverse impacts are felt upon adjacent properties. Conditions may be imposed to minimize any adverse impacts, and in this instance, during this time period of the first interim use permit, I have not had any complaints that there were any adverse impacts. The date or event that will terminate the use can be identified with certainty with a maximum duration of 5 years from the date of approval, and this would be 5 years from council approval. The use will not adversely impact the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Again, no complaints have been received. It's not a terribly unusual use or have any extreme nuisance factors. The use is similar to existing uses in the area. It could be, I suppose, similar to agricultural use. There are no large animals nearby, but the veterinary clinic did obtain permits but chose not to expand. The use shall conform to zoning regulations. Although the city council could waive ordinance provisions upon a finding that the temporary nature of the interim use will eliminate the adverse effects the provisions were intended to prevent. Here, the petitioner is asking the council to waive zoning provisions, or actually she's asking for a variance, so it's not really a waiver. But I guess as a practical effect, it's a waiver. to limit accessory structure coverage to 1,800 square feet in an R1 district. There is adequate assurance that the property will be left in a suitable condition after the use is terminated. Again, there's no reason why the property couldn't be restored to its previous condition. By agreement, the use will not impose additional costs on the public if it is necessary for the public to take the property in the future. Doesn't seem really applicable here. And same with Part H, the property owner or other mutually designated party agrees that any conditions that the council has determined appropriate for permission of the use, including optional condition, and that the party provide an appropriate financial surety to cover the cost of removing the interim use upon expiration of the interim use permit. I just put C application. There's a statement in the application. Let me see if I can pull that up here quick. So the petitioner signs this statement that they understand the issuance of an IUP does not create an entitlement to future reapproval. The use will not impose additional costs on the public if the public is required to take ownership, and that they will abide by the conditions of the approval. And then, let's see. And then there's just a description of what the IUP is requesting. And then the petitioner's signature here. So the recommendations are similar to the first interim use permit, except adding additional horse, that there be 5 horses limited to an area consisting of approximately 3 acres of the property. The overall estate consists of 17 and a half acres. Is that, or was it more? I think it's, 17 and a half acres. Additional horse related structures. I think I left this from actually this didn't get changed from the first IUP, I think. I'll have to reference this. So there will be more detail about the variance and the addition to the existing structure in the next matter. So we have recommended that vegetative cover would be maintained in the pasture to prevent erosion and other water contamination. There is some slope in the area. Okay, I lost my... And then due to adjacent major roads and the safety of the animals in general, fencing must effectively secure the horses. That the property and adjacent properties must be used continuously for non-conforming agricultural use and consist of more than 10 acres to buffer the use from adjacent properties. That the horses must have basic needs met. That the buildings must be maintained and in good condition. Waste must be properly handled, and that any required permits or licenses must be obtained and current. And I'll just go through. So this was sent to the neighbors, the Hans, Justices, and Johnson. I have not heard from anyone except Mr. Hahn is here tonight. And he had said he was here in support of the extension of the interim use permit, but he can also speak to that if he wishes. And then, let's see, because both items, this was relevant to both items, so I just put this on the end. So these are just some photographs of the horses and the existing structures. This structure here where the horses are actually, I think is, we zoom in, I think that's this structure, yep, okay. And then this structure over here is where they have, where there's some storage for equipment and hay. Let me go back here. Yeah, so then this is the other larger building. And then here's another aerial, which shows where there's proposed additions. And I think I'll talk more about the reason for that in the next matter. Unless you want more details, just let me know. But basically, it's to provide some exercise space, and the distance to this building is difficult in the winter for the horses to make. Do you have any questions on the initial interim use matter?
Any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Wallace?
No.
Okay, it's an open public hearing, so if anybody feels compelled to address the commission, they can do so now. I don't have any questions myself. I don't know if any of the other commissioners do. Need to come up to the podium, state your name and your address, please.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Closer? My name's Jim Hahn. I'm a neighbor. I live at 2800 2nd Avenue Northwest. I'd be directly northwest of where Nikki's property is. And I've lived there 3.5 years. So one comment I'd make is that I live northeast of her property. So if we have some good southwest prevailing winds, I should, come up with some, fragrances. But quite honestly, I've been up to Nikki's place numerous times, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. But I would say that the horses, and I think that's the issue as much as anything here, horses are very well cared for. The box stalls are cleaned daily. The paddock is picked up daily. Manure is removed weekly from the spreader or the trailer that they contain it in. And so I guess I'm, as a neighbor, we seldom see or hear them or certainly smell them, the horses. So like I say, I don't see any reason. As a matter of fact, I like taking my grandkids up there to see the horses, and we go up and visit once in a while. And I think she's an excellent neighbor, and I don't see any reason to change the conditional use permit that they currently have. So, any questions?
She let you ride them?
Pardon me?
She let you ride them?
No. We haven't asked that
Work
yet.
on that.
In the new building, he can ride.
There you go.
Some of us are getting the age that maybe riding maybe isn't the most. Okay?
Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate the information.
So I have a question. Is the other structure on 2806?
That's a good point, actually. All of these properties were combined via a covenant, so they are all considered one parcel for purposes of building.
Okay.
The only property that I think is separate is this one on the corner, and 51 is separate. 51, no, down here.
The commercial.
Okay. So these lots are combined. I think I might have a document that shows that. I thought I included.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. But they also own the 2 closest. Anything else?
Just to be clear, this first action is just to renew the interim use permit, right?
Yeah, with
For
the
another 5 years?
staff recommendations.
And the only change to that actually is the additional horse,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
And then the second action will be on the new building.
right? That will deal with a variance, which has a different, requirement for review.
So if there's no further questions, I'll look for a motion. This is recommendation to council also. And I think that motion should probably reference the 9 staff recommendations
Yes.
as part of the interim use permit. Anybody?
I'll make a motion to recommend the
Renewal.
the renewal of the IUP based off of the 9 recommendations from the staff.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Norman and a second from Commissioner Swenson to recommend to council to approve the request to extend the interim use permit, citing all 9 of the staff recommendations. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. So the next item is to consider a petition also from Nicola Baumann for a variance allowing the 60 by 80 additional accessory structure. Holly?
So the same location. Again, the petitioner has 6 parcels of Flywell Woodshire combined, well, actually, let me go back to this. We got 5 combined, but there are actually 7 parcels that are part of the property. There's currently home, 3 detached structures. There's a detached garage that goes with the residence, and then the 2 barns/storage structures. The petitioner received a variance in 2017 to add a 36 by 40 structure for shelter and a 60 by 80 structure for hay equipment storage and exercise. The parcels were combined under the covenant to create a 14.8 acre parcel. Which is, I just put in here, approximately 108 times larger than our minimum residential lot. The square footage of the existing accessory structures is just over 7,000 square feet. 1,800 is what's allowed, so that's quite a variation. The proposed addition would create just under 12,000 square feet. However, we do allow 40% coverage of a lot. And in this instance, because of the size of the property, the coverage is only going to be a little over 1%. And then with the proposed addition, just about 2%, which is far less than a typical city lot. So the primary use for the 60 by 80 addition to the existing barn or shelter would be to allow safe activity year-round for the horses. Being in a pasture also provides exercise, however, they are limited during our winter months. And then at that time, it becomes inaccessible due to ice and snow. I don't know horses, but the petitioner noted that hauling on ice is particularly dangerous for horses in the winter. So having an area close to where their living spaces would be preferable. And then other considerations were weighed, but the development of the retention pond that the city had added to the property made construction difficult to create a larger building at the time. And the petitioner did think about connecting the existing structures, but because of the distance between them, it wasn't really practical. If the planning commission chooses to recommend recommend approval of the requested variance, it should consider the location of the structure, the permanence of the structure, the purpose of setbacks, covered and accessory structure limits, health and safety, air and open space protection of other structures. In this instance, it's really only the square footage that's an issue. There's plenty of space on this particular property. So the state statute requires that the planning commission and city council determine that the variance is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning code, that the variance is consistent with our comprehensive plan, that the applicant has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the provision, and that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the provision. And then that breaks down into 3 items. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, and in this instance, it was annexed into the city as large road parcels. The variance will not permit any use that is not allowed in the zoning district where the affected land is located. The petitioner is requesting interim use permit and for multi-use buildings to assist with the use that will be with the care of the horses. The variance will not alter the essential character of the surrounding area. Higher construction and aesthetic standards were proposed. From the comments from at least one neighbor, there's no, it seems like we do really get a lot of comments that people hate how buildings look, but I haven't heard anything negative in this particular instance. And it seems to fit the area, but that of course is subjective. It's somewhat set back from the adjacent road and neighboring properties. I think just me driving by, and maybe yourselves as well, it is kind of hard to notice what's all back there. And then just to note that economic considerations alone shall not constitute an undue hardship if a reasonable use of the property exists under the terms of the ordinance. So you could approve, you could make a recommendation to approve, to not approve, or approve with conditions. There's some suggested conditions of approval. The first one was that a covenant join the parcels that were identified where the buildings would be located, and that was completed in 2017. And that the style of structures added will conform to the neighborhood and be approved by the planning department. And then there's just a suggested motion to approve.
Would that mean coming back before the commission to present those plans for the design and architecture of the structure?
At this point, I think it would just be an addition to what's existing, so it would just match what's there. I don't think there would be any need for an additional approval. So we could honestly take that out. It's not really necessary.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just want to say on the record, just so that there's clarity both for you folks and for you folks, that this is a variance, and so this will stay with the land regardless of whether the horses stay with the land. The interim use permit comes back every 5 years, somewhat dependent on, is there other development in the area? Is there some concerns about the horses that have somehow arisen that we have problems with it? So that use, because it's interim, could expire at some point. So I want you to approach this question not based upon that it's going to be something for horse activity in the winter. I mean, that's a nice reason for it, but you know, you could have a similar landowner who collects antique cars or something, and they have a plot of land this big, like this one, and they want to build a large storage facility for their cars set back and in this neighborhood. And so just think about it more in terms of, this is a very large piece of property. This is not going to make a crowded, you know, area or be really offensive to the neighbors. There are large buildings already there, and they're not causing a problem, because 20 years from now, that building will still exist. These folks may have moved on or sold it to somebody else, and that person will be using this building for whatever they want, which may or may not have anything to do with horses. So I just wanted to kind of disconnect the two in that way. The requests are certainly combined because the same application, and for right now, we're going to be using it for horses, but long-term, you should think about these two separately. Not suggesting there's a right answer one way or another, not trying to get you to go any direction. I just didn't want you to think that if the horses leave, these buildings somehow leave. They will be there.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? It's also an open public hearing. Was there anything else from the floor? Doesn't look like it, so I'll entertain a motion. Anybody?
I did put something in this one. I mean, occasionally I do for maybe some of the newer members of the planning commission to have some example of what a motion might look like. Because sometimes you're thinking about a lot of different things. But I think I did include at the end, under the staff report, an example if, you know, if that helps.
All motion, move the planning commission recommends with the variance request for the addition of the existing accessory structures. I don't know. That's the same one, isn't it? For the building.
Thank you. We have a second?
Second.
Aaron? All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Schrock and a second from Commissioner Stewart to recommend to council to approve the additional accessory structure. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Any items for discussion, Holly?
No, I don't, other than, we do have a use table in our zoning code that we had updated recently, and I think I'd like to send that out to all of you just to look at it and see if you see any gaps of things that might, I know there are some actually, but if you, could review that as well, I think that would be great help, and I'll just email that to you and we can have a discussion about it at our next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from the commissioners? Otherwise, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All right. Motion from Commissioner Burrows and a second from Commissioner Swenson to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion